Do you remember at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic when everybody was reeling and running to try and buy as much toilet paper as they possibly could to stockpile it? And we ran into a real shortage. The toilet paper companies could not keep up with production. And this is one of the most recent and significant examples of how disruptions in a supply chain can really negatively impact a consumer and a population base as a whole. A couple of things that we learn as we look into the impact of natural disasters such as pandemics or hurricanes on supply chains is that when you are really relying on one pinch point in your supply chain, like say you have to source something through one specific supplier, if a natural disaster takes that supplier out, then you might get swept off of your feet, right? Um, and that is why we have to stay on our toes as supply chain managers, and you have to plan for that, right? You have to really try and widen your base. An example of this most recently was Hurricane Helena, went and it took out the only two mines in the world that produced a pure quality quartz. And so this quartz was really necessary for computer chip production and everything from like your phones, tablets, laptops, all the way up to cars. Everything that used computer chips was reeling from this shortage that occurred because these two mines were taken out. So what you really have to do is you have to widen your base and increase the number of suppliers who are supplying stuff throughout your supply chain. Try to avoid being dependent on two mines that are right next to each other, you know? And if that is the case, you have to be aware of anything that could be happening to them so you can prepare and stockpile, right? If we circle back to the toilet paper example that I was talking about earlier, it's super important that you can be agile and flexible as a company in your production. A lot of people don't know this, but like your corporate toilet paper, like the really cheap stuff that you find in public restrooms and such, they had plenty of capacity to produce that and meet the demand that was occurring in the COVID pandemic, but they were not flexible enough in order to swap that over and create kind of the domestic toilet paper that everybody's buying for their homes. And so that's where that shortage comes from. If you're flexible and agile, you can switch up your machinery a little bit and meet that demand, which is not what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. Another thing, it's super important that you can hold inventory, right? And especially you have to store that inventory throughout the entire supply chain so that all of the supply chain can be going at once. You don't run into these pinch points again and whatnot. It's also important that you develop a relationship with your suppliers. You know, when worst case scenario hits, maybe you'll be able to chalk up a deal because you've been a long time customer with them and have a good relationship. You can also work together and develop technologies that will help to improve efficiency and resiliency during these big natural disasters. Another question that you need to consider is, should I offshore or nearshore my suppliers? What is the best way and how can I be most resilient to these natural disasters? And so there's a lot of trade-offs that you have to consider here. Offshoring is generally cheaper because they have cheaper labor overseas. But nearshoring provides a lot of positive externalities, right? If you're employing a supplier that's closer to you, that's more people with jobs, more people buying your product. You have a greater flexibility in your ordering schedule. So say a big company wants to chalk up a big deal with you for 200 custom jackets. You can go right away and fill that out because you can just order it from your neighbor, essentially, and they'll bring it right over, low time to order. And then you still have to pay attention to disruptions like politically. If like a war is going to be happening near you or a natural disaster, you're still going to be susceptible to that. So anyways, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is predictive analytics. Thanks to technology, data is more present and available than it ever has been. And so what companies are trying to do is they take this data, they model it, they create algorithms that can predict whether there will be a supply chain shortage thanks to quality issues, if the quality of the production might be a problem down the road. You can really analyze and predict dangerous weather patterns and trends and anticipate stocking up your inventory. And overall, it makes it a lot easier to anticipate disruptions and such. So anyways, that is my short dissertation on how natural disasters can impact supply chains and what we can do to combat that. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. My name is Justin.